Yeah, I'll react to that, sure.
Building beautifully is
Guys, preemptive, like, I learned about this a few months ago, and I criticized it, saying, "Oh, what is a king going to know about building a, for normal?" Turns out I was wrong, and it turns out to be pretty successful, and people like it. So I am trying to learn more about this. Original link to the video from the Aesthetic City, top of the description. My name's Connor. If you're new, let's learn, or let's watch and learn.
still
Hi, guys.
possible. The name of the town? Poundbury. King Charles did the unthinkable and built a completely new town, proving that building beautifully is still possible. The name of the town? Poundbury. It was a daring experiment, and many thought it was going to fail, but instead the town became a huge success. But how? I traveled to this newly built place twice to discover its secrets, and even interviewed the very master planner who designed
Beautiful so far.
You will hear the incredible story of how a visionary planner and a future king collaborated on this unique town, turning the king's vision for a harmonious, beautiful Britain into reality. We will discover how this urban experiment was built, even though many believed it would fail, and how it became a thriving, popular place to live, proving all its critics wrong. In this video, I will also reveal the 6 design secrets that led to Poundbury's success. But we'll also look at what could perhaps be improved. Even better, we'll see how Poundbury even leads to exciting new developments elsewhere. The ideas behind Poundbury are spreading. So, let's get started. It's autumn, and once again I'm traveling to an edition of the IMCL Congress. Only this time it's not in Paris, but in a very special place in England. A new town developed right next to Dorchester, and that town is called Poundbury. This new development in the stunning Dorset landscape now has around 4,100 inhabitants. That's a lot less than Le Plessis-Robinson, which you might know from one of my previous videos. When you walk around the streets, the town looks surprisingly normal. You wouldn't even notice it is new, and that is exactly its strength. It's just a pleasant place, without many eyesores, or buildings that scream for attention. Everything is built with beauty and harmony in mind. The town was the initiative of not just a regular developer, but of the current King of England, His Royal Highness King Charles III. If you thought that this somehow meant it was easy to create this town, think again. As you will learn in this video, the very existence of this town is almost a miracle, as there were so many.
One of the things that I sort of worried is that it would look sort of like a movie set, like, because of how new it is. And I do get a little bit of that vibe, but I feel like as time goes on, it'll look less and less like that, as stuff kind of blends in more, as like kind of nature takes its course.
As you will learn in this video, the very existence of this town is almost a miracle, as there were so many obstacles to create it like it is today. But before all that, we need to look at the reason why this town was built in the first place. And for that, we have to look at the king and his vision for Britain. During his life, Prince Charles saw how his beloved country was changing rapidly. Britain's cities and countryside were transforming, and not in a good way. Pristine landscapes were torn apart by motorways, soulless industrial areas encroached on peaceful meadows, and in the cities, charming neighborhoods were bulldozed to be replaced by grimy, low-quality flats. Instead of streets lined by terraced houses, people were cramped in stark, depressing housing estates, with anonymous elevators and galleries, leading to more isolation and ripping apart communities. And the same happened in historical inner-city areas. Even though plenty of cities escaped the Blitz, few cities escaped the bulldozer. Many city centers in Britain were ravaged, with hostile experiments in concrete
1.5
disrupting the
million?
harmonious urban fabric. All of this was the product of modern planning practices and architecture in the name of progress, and approved by city councils that wanted something new and experimental. Many of these
Guys, with something like this, like, what makes this not look so appealing? I guess kind of the windows. I love brick, you know? But maybe some kind of... I don't know. It looks like an old, like, 90s elementary school. I don't know if maybe this material was cheaper instead of just using all brick. And maybe having like some kind of, I don't know. I'm I'm trying to see what you guys kind of think here.
All of this was the product of modern planning practices and architecture in the name of progress, and approved by city councils that wanted something new and experimental. Many of these experiments, though, would soon deteriorate so badly that they had to be torn down after just a few decades, making them incredibly unsustainable. The few cities that did escape more or less intact, like York or Bath, became tourist attractions. It was this wave of unsustainable ugliness and inconsiderateness that alerted.
Guys, oh my god, I actually thought that was someone walking by. But I'm not saying every building has to have columns, but even something like this looks, I feel like, makes buildings look better. Like the corner with these stone blocks here. Windows look nice.
Cities that did escape more or less intact, like York or Bath, became tourist attractions. It was this wave of unsustainable ugliness and inconsiderateness that alerted a young Prince Charles. Silently, he observed this nightmare unfolding in slow motion, until he could no longer hold himself and had to speak out. But before we continue, something a bit different. Have you ever stayed in a place that didn't make you feel well, or noticed how an environment influenced your mood? Well, that's no coincidence. There are countless studies that prove that our surroundings have a significant impact on our physical and mental health. This is something urbanists and architects can consider by designing places that lift the spirit, that are walkable, green and beautiful. But even in an optimal environment, it's not always a guarantee that you will feel well or be free of problems.
Paris is beautiful. Okay, I know it's known for being beautiful, but I don't think it's overrated. It's the most beautiful, actually, building-wise. Maybe not natural beauty, you know, like saw in like the Alps and lower Germany, or I guess it'd be upper Germany, close to Austria and Switzerland. But also Bruges, Belgium, I think it was, looked awesome, like architecture-wise. But Paris, like, all of the streets are, like, perfectly wide. There's nice trees along it. They all kind of lead somewhere. They're beautiful outdoor cafes and seating areas. And it just looks awesome. Yeah. So whatever they did, or whoever, you know, was most responsible for the look of Paris and just the style of its buildings, oh my god.
In today's society, factors like stress and social media really take a toll on our mental health. I've noticed myself that having to be online all the time can be really challenging sometimes. Modern life is demanding, and like most people, I've had my share of obstacles to overcome. This is where BetterHelp comes in, the sponsor of today's video.
Guys, if you're interested in BetterHelp and you learned it here, you want to use it, check it out. Make sure to use their promo codes, the link to the original video, top of the description. Please use their links if you heard it from here and you're interested, okay, guys?
Out of personal experience, I've become a firm believer that a lot of the problems we face lie within, but that makes it not always easy to address them. BetterHelp makes that a bit easier and less intimidating, as they let you have sessions via phone call, video chat, or just simple messages, whatever works best for you. BetterHelp is a network of over 30,000 therapists, each with their own expertise. And a question.
I'm not saying that there's no difference between a good therapist and a bad one, voice crack. But as someone who's had therapy a lot, sometimes the biggest help is just voicing your stuff. So I like voicing out loud your stuff to someone. So if you're hesitant that like you don't think you're going to get a great therapist who knows you, the bare minimum of just speaking is really helpful.
Matching you to the right one just for you. Even if you have a busy calendar, BetterHelp makes it easy to get help by scheduling sessions at times that work for you. And if your therapist isn't a great fit, you can easily switch to another one, free of cost, with the click of a button, because you don't want to go through a whole process again, especially not if you have enough stress already. So join over 4 million people who have used BetterHelp to live a more healthy, happy life. Click the link in the description or visit betterhelp.com/aestheticcity. By clicking the link, you not only help support the channel, but you also get 10% off of your first month of BetterHelp, so you can connect with a therapist and see if it helps you.
Use the
/aestheticcity
/aestheticcity
for sponsoring this video, and let's continue. Prince Charles was getting more and more annoyed with how Britain was defaced, until he felt he just had to act. In 1982, the National Gallery in London planned to expand onto Trafalgar Square, with a design by Aarons, Burton and Corlick architects. It looked a bit like this. and Prince Charles did not like it. It was 1984 when Prince Charles gave a speech that would become legendary and that would can the proposal for the National Gallery. He described the building as follows.
What is proposed is like a monstrous carbuncle on the face of a much-loved and elegant friend.
The British architecture community was shocked. Soon, they banded together in opposition to the Prince of Wales. But the future king wouldn't budge. Far from it. In 1988, the prince took another big leap and launched a documentary and later a book called A Vision of Britain. In this, he poured his love for the crafts and the human-scaled, beautiful Britain which countless generations had worked so hard for to create. He also criticized the treatment of well-functioning historical city districts and how the opinions of the mass of ordinary people were just ignored. But even this would not be enough to turn the tide. The world needed an example of what could be, proof that an alternative was actually possible. He decided that if he couldn't beat the planners, architects and builders, he should join them. So around the same time that he created his vision of Britain, the future king decided to create a town of his own. The prince had lands near Dorchester, tied to his title to the Prince of Wales, the Duchy of Cornwall. It is a private estate that was established by Edward III in 1337 to provide independence to his son and heir, Prince Edward. It would fund the charitable and private activities of the Prince of Wales and his family for centuries to come. Of course, the prince also needed a brilliant mind who could shape his ideas for a new town into an actual plan. And there was one person who could turn his vision into reality: Leon Creer.
When the Prince of Wales, when he made his speech to architects in 1984, it was a bombshell. And all over England for weeks and weeks, people would talk about architecture and that he was right, including architects and Foster's associates and even Rogers. They made declarations that as a result of his speech, they would change their policy, their design policy towards something more civic or something more classical.
In 1988, Leon Creer was appointed to work on the concept for a town which would become Poundbury.
He said, "No, you don't have to explain it. I know it all. Would you want to be my consultant about architecture and urbanism?" I said, well, why not? But then a year later, I became head of a team which had already been responsible for being involved with a project before, which he didn't like. And I remember when we first sat around the table with the planning company who had looked after the project before.
Did he fire him?
And said, Leon is now he's going to take over that job. And then the head of this company, Drivers Jonas company, Christopher Jonas, he looked like Dr. Spock. But he said, of course, we will take on board what Leon tells us. And so the prince banged the table very loudly and said, "You are not going to take on board, you are going to do what Leo tells you."
Leon Creer had a clear vision for Poundbury. The town would not be a simple extension of Dorchester, but an autonomous new settlement. It would have one town centre, but also local village centres, as the town would consist of multiple smaller communities. Between the local village centres and the town centre would be attractive pedestrian routes. The village centres had some basic functions to make sure everything was accessible within a 10-minute walk. The plan was divided in a number of phases. The first phase bordered Dorchester directly. It was built in the early to mid-90s, and it has a more diverse vernacular architecture and windy roads. By now, the trees have grown and the buildings have gotten some patina. The second phase was much larger, with 900 dwellings. After this, the southwest quadrant followed, then Queen Mother Square, and then the northeastern quadrant, which is almost finished. One quadrant is yet to be built, the northwest quadrant, which should be completed in 2026. A number of different architects worked on designs for the buildings, like Ben Pentreath, George Amar Smith, Quinlan and Francis Terry, and John Simpson.
I love the look of
During the creation
the
of
building
Poundbury,
so far. I don't have the architectural vocabulary, if that is a word, architecture, but just the columns, the windows look amazing. The weathering of it, I think, which will happen over time, which has already happened, like he showed the trees growing, but with the buildings getting a little dirty, but in a good way, I think. Just looks amazing. And I don't know what I was so hesitant about in believing this could be a good thing. Like, when I learned about this like a few months ago, I was just adamant that, okay, what is this going to be? What does he know? And, well, turns out he knows a lot. So, just it looks amazing so far.
And Francis Terry and John Simpson. During the creation of Banbury, Leon Creer and the Prince faced some huge and sometimes bizarre challenges. It began with an internal struggle between the Prince and his very own team. There were faulty project revenue calculations, and even threatening calls of an influential entrepreneur who didn't want competition by a Banbury supermarket. At some point, Leon was finally firmly in place as lead designer and things seemed to go more easy. But that's when the bureaucratic hurdle started. From opposing views on street design to unlogical parking schemes for the center, to opposition against the towers and the impact they would have on the surrounding land. The bureaucratic hurdle started. From opposing views on street design to unlogical parking schemes for the center, to opposition against the towers and the impact they would have on the surrounding landscape. One after the other hurdle was thrown up. Then there were budget constraints, which limited the options for the paving of the streets, and the sudden disappearance of a key manager during the 2008 financial crisis. But nothing could stop Banbury from getting built.
Disappearance? Is he okay?
Slowly but surely, one by one, the phases of Banbury were completed.
Looks freaking amazing. Love it. The brick, the whiteness of whatever material this is. Like it.
Another kind of opposition.
Roof chimneys.
Sneers of the media and architects. Banbury was supposedly the toy town of a prince who had lost all touch with reality. It was an experiment doomed to fail, a kitsch Disneyland. However,
that's kind of how I felt first time learning about it.
Poisonous the journalists, architects and their hit pieces, they couldn't change the fact that Banbury was starting to look like an enormous success. Apart from one final phase, most of Banbury is now completed. The reason that it succeeded is very simple. There was strong demand for what was getting built, and people simply loved the homes and the atmosphere of the town. Banbury became so lucrative even, that it became another reason to attack the project. The success of Banbury must have made the architects who called it kitsch and mock even more angry, as it proved to people
there's nothing more annoying in any field, not just architecture, than educated. It's one of the most depressing things that I've learned kind of just growing up, and is that no matter the education or expertise, you can't get rid of people still have their egos that get in the way of what is successful in their own field. And that is one of the most depressing and maddening things. That you actually look at a success at something, instead of saying, wow, I was wrong and changing, or I could be wrong, you get mad and try and stop it.
People simply prefer the
or
very
critique
thing
it.
They hated so much. The funniest thing about Banbury is how normal it feels, for the most part at least. Queen Mother Square is a bit more of a spectacle. Both the old and the newer parts are very charming. I especially love the Woodlands Crescent. With its fully grown trees in the park, it's a hopeful glimpse in Banbury's future, when all the trees have matured.
Main thing, I think, is trees. Trees, it's things I notice in Paris. I've only been twice, and once I was much younger. I still remember it, though. So first time was probably like 18 years ago. And the last part was like 8 years ago. So maybe a little less. No, about 8 years. And it was the combination of the just beautiful looking buildings and all the trees along the street. So crucial. I hated New York City. I went to St. John's University, and then I transferred and finished at Providence College in Rhode Island. But St. John's University in Queens, New York. And yeah, there were kind of some trees every now and then, but just I hated it. I freaking hated it, okay? Not just like the normal things that come with cities, like noise, but I felt like whenever I went back home, I felt like I can take my shoes off and walk outside, and like, I don't know what I'm saying. I do know what I'm saying. I can't say it. because I don't have the vocabulary right now. I just felt dirty and contained and like probably the difference between like an animal being in a zoo and then let out. You know what I'm trying to say? Just I hate it. And little things like that. I'm not saying this is a big city, but Paris is a big city. Why is it so beautiful over there and New York is so ugly?
Also, Banbury has sparked similar developments that built on the same principles, like in Newquay and Truro. And thanks to Banbury, the architects working on it were involved in many other projects, all over Britain in fact. So in the end, it seems that the King's vision has become a success and is spreading. Just look at the many projects by Adam Architecture or Ben Pentreath, and you see the beginnings of a new way of building cities. So now it's time to dive into the secrets of Banbury's success. First of all, mixed functions. Banbury was not just supposed to extend Dorchester, but it had to be an autonomous town with mixed functions like shops, offices, workplaces and houses. Why was that so important? Well, many newly built towns or city extensions are monotonous dormitory suburbs that don't offer anything else but housing. This is the result of the failed modernist idea of separation of functions. They kept housing separate, put shops in a mall and offices in an office park.
You got to keep industry separate, right? I mean, who wants?
But this makes these towns boring and prevents a thriving community from forming.
And you have to drive, like it's harder to travel places when there's stuff that for your mostly everyday needs is sort of around you. Reasonably around you, then you don't have to always drive everywhere.
As life happens where living,
take long transportation,
business and entertainment meet. In Banbury, you will see small shops, cafes, offices and restaurants everywhere. And the town is full of at-home workshops where mostly women have created a living for themselves. 2,600 people work in Banbury, which is really a lot.
I said social housing is useless if you don't have social workshops, so that the people who start their life with small family and they want to be independent, if they find cheap workshop, they will do a job, an independent job.
Number 2, the walkable city. The second design.
I have to say though about New York, I'll give it one thing, or at least living in Queens. I'm not sure if this is just standard, but there were always kind of shops in walking distance, despite it being, depending on where. I'm sure there were places that were more separated. Anyway, it's not important. I'm trying to not just completely hate on New York.
Independent job.
Number 2, the walkable city. The second design secret was that the town would be walkable and attractive for pedestrians and cyclists. The town is designed in a compact way and built to offer everything close by. The sidewalks offer plenty of room for pedestrians, and there are many parks and village greens for children to play. With windy roads and slightly raised intersections, cars slow down naturally, eliminating the need for ugly and useless traffic signs. Cars are parked in the mews, the narrow streets originally meant for carriages at the backside of houses, which you might know from London, which are designed in a similar way, slowing down traffic. Number 3, attractive local architecture. The third design secret was that Banbury would not be built with generic, modernist architecture one could find all over the planet, but with architecture that is adapted to the specific, charming character of Dorset. This included using local materials, and this meant that local builders and craftsmen had to be used. Number 4, affordable housing. The fourth secret to Banbury's success was that the town was to offer around a third of the homes as affordable housing. After all, to create a truly vibrant and healthy, diverse community, all layers of society should be represented and have a chance to live in a place like Banbury.
We have about 35% of social housing in town, mixed with other houses. And so there is already a variety of incomes who live next to each other. And instead of having them in one zone, we distributed them higgledy-piggledy.
Number 5, craftsmanship.
What about my property value?
Higgledy.
Number 5, craftsmanship. The fifth and one of the most underrated design secrets was to make the town using as much craftsmanship as possible within the budget. Most of the building industry has moved to industrial building methods. leading to a monotonous, sterile, machine aesthetic in buildings. Craftsmanship gives buildings a more humane, beautiful and soft character, and it often leads to higher quality as well. The prince found this incredibly important. To promote the crafts, he founded a foundation, the Prince's Foundation, which is now called the King's Foundation. This organization would train craftsmen and architects that would later work in Banbury. 6. Sustainability. Finally, the town was supposed to be built sustainably, with sustainable building materials such as only allowing timber windows instead of UPVC windows, which are hard to repair, often end up in landfills and contain hazardous chemicals. Also, Banbury features things like integrated bird boxes, a community orchard, and even an anaerobic digestion plant that turns biomethane into electricity. But using local materials and building methods like using structural masonry so the buildings can sustain for a long time are key as well. And the beauty of the town makes sure that it is worth keeping and that people don't tear it down prematurely, because the most sustainable building is the one you don't demolish. Does this mean that Banbury is perfect? Well, of course not. For example, I believe that the asphalt paving isn't as aesthetically pleasing as it could be. But as Leon Creer noted in her interview, some corners had to be cut.
Yeah, you can't.
Ideally, they want.
You can't, like, be taught and admire all of the in budget and using a lot of craftsmanship and making it aesthetic looking at a price and having housing for everyone, and then be like, well, this could look better. It's like, well, that was the whole point, is that you couldn't do everything.
To use natural stone pavers, but that was too expensive. Extra greenery
that
would also
would give it a really nice touch, though. Hold on. I mean, this looks beautiful. I mean, yeah, you can't have everything, but that would look nice.
Stone pavers, but that was too expensive. Extra greenery would also be another improvement. In some places, Banbury clearly lacks some green. The first phase of Banbury feels surprisingly green already. And in the newer parts, there are some wonderful green places as well. One point of critique I often hear is Queen Mother Square and its many parked cars. I understand this point of criticism, because it makes the square much less beautiful. But from what I've heard, underground parking simply wasn't feasible financially, and the business owners surrounding the square want their customers to be able to easily load their groceries. A final point of critique is that Banbury has become exclusive, or gentrified. Although places should be accessible to all income groups, I think this point is a bit unfair. A lot of effort was put into offering 35% of affordable homes in Banbury. Also, people weren't displaced, as it is a new development.
What's the saying? You can't let perfection be the enemy of the good. You know?
And thirdly,
It's like you're having expectations that are unreasonable.
the premium people pay to live in Banbury is a signal that this place works. It attracts people. So perhaps we should ask, why has it become such a commercial success? King Charles has, with the help of Leon Creer and many skilled architects, craftsmen and builders, showed the world that with vision and persistence, it's still possible in today's world to create harmonious, beautiful, sustainable places that are modern, but also respect local culture, valuable traditions and history. Even though Banbury is a massive success, there are many property developers and municipalities who don't seem to get the message. People are desperate for authenticity, beauty and harmony. They simply don't care about experimental concepts, but they want to live in nice places. The moment that decision makers start realizing this and start building what people want, it gets much easier to build, as there will be much less opposition, with happier residents and happier developers too. It will result in popular places that last longer because they are loved. And that's the key to a truly sustainable future. So this is the story about Banbury. What do you think about Banbury? Let me know in the comments.
Great video. One critique, I guess some of the critiques in the sea of kind of praises I have for it now, is that maybe, of course, having the cobblestone streets would be ideal, but I'm not, again, going to let the perfect be the enemy of the good here. And it seems like they could have kept incorporating more greenery that maybe they did at the beginning, but as they're building more and more and in other areas that I think that's super crucial. It's just having some more trees and greenery in some of the areas. But that is all I can really think of. Everything else looks incredible and works a lot, and I feel dumb for questioning it so much before a few months ago. Super good. Love y'all. Hope you guys are all doing well. Would appreciate any comments down below, and hopefully I'll see you guys next video. Bye, guys.